Hello, appreciate everybody sitting in on our session here. Kind of the format we went with is that I'll do a little bit of presentation, and then we'll have Mr. Jesse from Atwell do a little bit of presentation, and then we'll leave a chunk of time there at the end for everybody to kind of ask questions and hopefully get a little bit of a discussion going back and forth. So this presentation is going to be about design firms and utilities working together with AUD. Now I can kind of expand that a little bit to be, beyond just design firms, because there's several folks that have asked us about sharing, with applicant design processes and external design processes. So this really encompasses that as well. So when we're looking at AUD, and of course it continues to grow every year, the number of people that are using AUD, as it continues to be adopted, more people outside of the utilities are being exposed to AUD, and they're being asked to work with AUD. So we figured we'd go through and show some ways that folks can collaborate, right? We can see how a utility would work with an external entity like a design firm or an applicant design process. So when you break it down, there's kind of two different environments that we're discussing. And the first one would be an AUD configured environment. It's where a client already has, a utility already has AUD and has a workspace and a license available of AUD. So it's already configured and has your features and attributes and symbology. When you have this scenario, it's pretty straightforward for the design firms or the applicant design and the utility that has the AUD configuration to work together. At a bare minimum, if you just want a minimum kind of workflow, the workspace that contains your blocks and annotations and styles, and your template that contains the utility configuration for AUD, and a license of AUD is all that's needed to share data back and forth. At a very, very basic workflow level, the client environment could contain all sorts of integrations through Utility Data Hub, right? They could have integrations to work management, GIS, Vault, document management, and can read data in from those into the drawing file. And then once that drawing file is populated with the base data needed for that design, it can completely be shared with external design firm environments or applicant designs that have access to an AUD license and the workspace. And when that happens, the external user is working the same way that an internal utility user would work. They're using the same environment, same features, same materials, same everything. So in a very basic level, or at a very basic level, just passing the drawing back and forth will work and allow you to work together and collaborate. This seems to be a pretty popular strategy for some of our substation folks, right? The P4A users tend to be an environment where they share drawing files back and forth between them and their external contractors and design firms. This one we're seeing more and more popular, where the client actually hosts some sort of virtualization through a portal of some kind. You still have the same utility data hub and integrations inside of your environment and your utility environment, but the design firm or external designer is allowed to log in through a Citrix portal, usually over some sort of VPN methodology. And works in the same environment as the designers. This is kind of a more integrated approach and allows design firms and external entities that you work more closely with to have more access and to work more closely aligned with your process. So in an AUD world, as long as you have that workspace and the template and a license, you can share data pretty readily. Then comes into play some of the non-AUD sources. where you don't have or necessarily have a consistent relationship in place with an external entity, or you're receiving data from sources that don't necessarily do intelligent design. And for that, we also have several tools, and they're situationally, dependent. We can manually convert any kind of CAD point or line with the replace original keyword. We have CAD converts for standardized drawings. In many cases, an applicant design process will actually say that you must have these blocks on this layer and with this color, and be very defined about what they'll accept in that process. When you have that level of standardization, CAD convert can be a good option. And then I also just wanted to bring up a rubber sheeting method that we've been using here a lot lately, just because it's really helpful when you're absorbing non-geolocated or non-geoscaled objects into AUD. I'll quickly go over those here. The replace original used to be only accessible through Design Explorer, but we have shifted that to be part of any placement command inside of AUD. So as you start a placement from your menu item, one of your keywords will actually be to replace the item that you can select. So here I'm placing a polyline. I'm just doing a normal polyline, and it's not an AUD feature. And then I'm going and drawing a primary line and using the replace original keyword. Then you can select it and hit enter, just like you're drawing normally, but using the line that was already there. And you can see it validates, it resolves, it converts it over to a primary line, and all your other validations and auto feature placements and stuff will run on it. The only trick here is that sometimes you have to run the auto connect afterwards, depending on your rules, but the replace original will allow you to convert things in place if you have the capabilities or want to do that. The next one is the CAD convert, and I apologize for all the lines going around, but this seemed to be the easiest way to demonstrate what's going on here. So what you're seeing here is that this is a block that was just placed in a drawing, and that block has certain attributes, and they're CAD attributes. This is not an intelligent feature. You can see that I have it selected, but there's no features related to it in AUD. There is a color and a layer and a block assigned to this. Well, in your style editor, we understand that something that's on that layer with that color and this block is a certain type of object. And we have the ability to almost run those rules in reverse, right? So by defining these attributes down at the bottom, you can take these CAD properties, run them through the style editor backwards, and assign these properties to them. And what you end up with through this convert is this particular object with this particular values already set. So it reads these standard CAD properties, runs it through the style editor, and spits out an object that it should be. And that's what's kind of being shown down here, is just taking this block and running it through the CAD convert. And when it runs, it translates that block into the AUD intelligent feature. So for standardized drawings, applicant design processes, external designs that are on very certain layers, very certain blocks, very certain configurations, this can be a pretty big time saver in absorbing that non-AUD CAD function. This one has come about, a lot while we're working with our P4A clients. There's a need to geolocate, and when we geolocate, we often have non-scaled or non-geolocated stuff that we're wanting to put in place. And just wanted to share this with y'all. There is an ADER sheet, is a command up in the top left, and it's part of map, but it's basically a rubber sheeting command. And what I'm doing here is actually defining reference base points. I click on the corner of the object, and then I click on the associated corner where it goes, and then I select the objects that I want to scale and rotate. So I'm just selecting this thing that I imported, and you can see that it rubber sheets and snaps it and scales it and rotates it. It can be a really quick time saver when you're in an intelligent geolocated kind of location, and you're trying to absorb, you know, non-geolocated, non-scaled objects. So those are kind of the quick overview. Just wanted to give you a little introduction of, you know, how you could work together with AUD clients, and how an AUD configuration can be shared, and also give you some examples of how you can work with non-AUD folks, and how you could share CAD information back and forth. And then I'm going to turn it over to someone who does this on a regular basis. So Ryan, if you could let Mr. Jesse actually show him how it's done, I think he will take over next.
So Jim, you definitely gave me more of an introduction than I deserve here. So my name is Jesse Zellmer. I lead the distribution efforts for Atwell. If any of you attended the PUG in, I guess, Seattle, we had a couple years ago, one of my engineers, Joe Snodgrass, kind of presented how we're using AUD for some of our renewable customers. And then the projects we're working with wind farms and things. So I will give a quick update on that, just kind of let you guys know what we're doing and go from there. So, but a quick introduction for myself and Atwell. Atwell is a full service design and engineering consulting firm. We have, I think, 25 to 30 offices across the US in most major areas. We perform everything from environmental to permitting to land acquisition, survey, design, engineering, and we also have a EPC construction arm as well. So I kind of lead, as I mentioned, the distribution efforts and really focus a lot with utilities as my role, and distribution design is kind of the bread and butter that my team does. However, AUD has definitely become a larger sect of what we do. So I started with Atwell about 3 years ago, probably 3.5 years ago, came from a different firm, and I brought over a designer and an engineer from my previous firm. And when we came over to Atwell, I remember sitting in a conference room right before I was about to leave on a 2-week vacation. And we just kind of sat down and looked at, okay, we have a chance, an opportunity to completely change how we do distribution design. Coming to a new company, starting a new group, doing all of that, right? So we sat in that room for about 2 hours, wrote down a whole list of things. And at the end of it, it's like, shoot, these are all these things that we want this tool to do. And I don't know of anyone that does that. So let's build our own. Let's do our own thing. Let's become software vendors here. So it was kind of an interesting conversation on how that conversation went. So that's kind of how it was left. I left on my 2-week vacation, came back, and actually one of my designers in that 2 weeks really started looking at other options and found AUD. And then once we started really digging into it, looking at it, it checked almost every single box of what we wanted to do with true distribution utility design, but then also had some really neat features and abilities for us to tailor it to other things we were doing currently at Atwell. So our first implementation that we really started using AUD for was for wind park collection system design. So that's essentially the 34.5 kV underground feeders from the turbines getting back to the substation. And as I mentioned, Joe Snodgrass gave a presentation on this a couple years ago, so I'll go through that real quick. But essentially what it allowed us to do is do our designs in CAD, but have the smart functionality to automatically create bill of materials and different charts and graphs and things like that too, that allowed us to be smart about how we did our design. And the thing that we were very impressed with AUD for is it's very configurable and allows us to be very flexible in what we do. Because we do these renewable designs for multiple types of clients, they all generally kind of want the same thing, but each one is very different on the types of deliverables they want, the way the deliverables look, the calculations we use, the material they use. So it became one of those things where how can we tailor this to all these things? But AUD really did allow us to do a lot of that. So we've been using the AUD for about 3 years now. Always been very, very impressed with it. And it started from 1 or 2 guys using it on a couple of projects as a beta test in 2019. We have, I think, 10 designers and engineers currently that are using it for our renewable projects on things that come up here and there. So it's really grown. We've made it part of our true design process for these projects. So it's not just something that we're kind of doing and playing with anymore. It's a legit part of our business. So anyway, so continuing on what we've done in the last few years, AUD has incredible flexibility and allows us to tailor to specific clients' projects, as I mentioned. So the different types of projects that we work on are different types of terrain and environmental demands. And one really good example of this was a project we worked on last year. One of the deliverables that we needed to provide to our renewable client was a crossing matrix. So every time we have a crossing, we needed to represent it on this very large chart, very large matrix, right? And the tricky part with that is there were many different types of crossings. So there's water crossings, there's utility crossings, multiple types of utilities, so telecom, water, overhead, transmission, all these types of things, road crossings, and each one of those had different characteristics that we needed to separate. So what we ended up doing was drawing our line across that crossing, and then we would draw a crossing feature on top of it, and then provide it certain requirements and certain attributes that showed it was a water crossing, utility crossing, road crossing. And the time that saved was incredible on this project because we probably had over 200 to 300 different crossings. And to be able to keep track of all those manually was an incredible time saver for us. So that was a really nice addition that we used last year. We used it on all projects, but the benefit of it really showed through last year. Another thing that we're using as well is the one-line diagram feature. From my understanding, and I'm not the expert on this, I think SRP has used the one-line feature for a while, but you can use the one-line diagram feature, and then once you have it kind of tailored and customized for how you want it to look, it kind of locks in place the structure of it. But if we were to change the length of certain cables or the equipment location names or dynamic blocks on the types of things that are done, when you changed it in the original design, it automatically updated on the one-line diagram. And one thing that we can say for certain is that on these renewable projects, these projects change constantly. So that has been an incredible feature and savings for us as well. Another great feature for us using on these projects is automatic callouts. So when we select a certain type of crossing, like I mentioned before, or a piece of equipment, if that stuff changes, these automatic callouts that pop up are automatically numbered for a certain, so it could be a junction box 2 through 29. Those are automatically generated for us. They automatically call out the detail drawings that are later on in our construction packet, and exported. It even allows us to do exported bore schedules and other crossing data too. So essentially, what we've really done is making a design that we've done for years, just using straight AutoCAD, and automated so many different features of it. And AUD has allowed us to do that. So another thing that we're working on right now, most of these projects have been underground so far, but we're actively working on an overhead and underground project right now. So we're kind of playing around with some of the pole heads and things like that, customizing them to this client, working on risers, and then working on surface and elevation snapping. So I'm really excited to hear the enhancements that are coming along with elevation on the previous presentation, because we are working on a project that is in a very mountainous terrain, and if we are to bury this cable at a certain depth, the terrain is going to have an incredible impact on the amount of cable that's going to be needed for the bill of materials for this project. So we're excited about that. That's something that we're definitely going to be working on here soon. Another major enhancement, or I guess addition to our AUD projects over the last couple of years, is we have been able to successfully convert from a wind collection system to solar. And so we use custom models to create inverters as sources. And it is very similar to wind, but vastly different materials, voltages, design constraints, calculations. Essentially, we're doing the same thing, but a lot of the details are very, very different. And the AUD configuration, the way it's set up, really allowed us to have an easy transition with it. And here's another very interesting thing that came up that we're using AUD for that you typically don't think about is PV string naming. So if you can picture a large solar farm, each one of those strings has a different naming convention, and different blocks. But we used AUD rules to make spatial measurements within that solar array, and then group PV strings together, and then automatically name them based on the block and the position within the block. And the reason why this is so incredibly important for us is on this one project specifically, there were approximately 6,000 strings per project. And if we didn't have AUD to automatically label those for us, that would be a manual interaction that we would have to do. And if there was any changes on that, it would have an incredible effect on our hours put on it. So, and if you update one block name, on the project itself, it automatically updated all the different string names that came after that. So I just can't say enough about this product on the way it allows us to do tasks that were manual, that can be extremely added with efficiency for the success of the project. So we've had a lot of great success. We're continuing to bring in more designers and engineers and train them and how to use it, and continually add more functionality with it as well. So really, really incredible what our renewable team is doing with this. I guess other areas that we're using AUD or about to use with AUD is we have some oil and gas customers throughout the US that are wanting to electrify a lot of their pumps and things that happen out in the oil fields. And what they're finding is a lot of utilities just don't have fast enough ability to give them an electric source. So they're actually designing their own distribution system to feed these facilities. And we're going to be creating a template here soon within AUD to design a lot of these things for us. So it's going to be very simple, very easy, creating bill of materials, creating estimates, creating construction prints. But again, AUD allows us to customize this tool for the different clients that we have. We are using it with our utility customers as well. There's a few out there that are using AUD, and we're using it as a staff augmentation or project work that work on utilities. We are doing some configuration support for different utilities that may have already had the tool for a while, and then would like some additional help to help configure and help make enhancements or work on defects, things like that. We're partnering with SPS on some large implementations for new customers. And the last thing that I've been kind of playing with personally here is 3D and virtual reality, especially when it comes to the substation work. So Atwell, as a Christmas gift for the company and for certain individuals, actually purchased I don't even know what it's called anymore. It's the Facebook VR system. My apologies, I'm blanking on the name right now. But what I was able to do is I was able to talk to SPS and say, hey, could you guys give me a 3D substation that I can get in and play with? And I found this company called Iris VR, Oculus. Thank you, Matt. The Oculus headset. So I was able to talk to SPS, and they gave me a 3D substation to play with. And I found this company called Iris VR, and they use a software called Prospect VR. And I was able to import that into their system and use the Oculus to literally walk around the substation in. So it allowed me the ability to transport and walk around the substation at the floor. It allowed me to go subsurface and actually see all of the cabling and the grounding mat and conduits and things underneath. It allowed us to actually fly above the substation. So we can see different connections that might be 30 feet in the air. So there's some really neat things that can be done with three-dimensional design that SBS is really going through with this substation product. So really is a really incredible product. I'm excited to see more about substation work and on how that's working and how we can use that for our customers and go from there. So.